AskReddit by Sinibini. What are the craziest declassified CIA documents? You can download most of Osama bin Laden's hard drive off the CIA's website. It's got a fair few licensed movies, anime, games, that sort of thing. All free for anyone who wants to get it. And his Animal Crossing save file. One CIA operative, who drew up a plan to have packets of extra large condoms, labeled small, dropped on USSR. The idea was to lower their morale. The real LPT is to use a box of extra large and fill it with a proper smaller size. So when the sex partner sees the extra large label on the box, they will think your small penis is really large. The acoustic kitty is pretty crazy. Declassified CIA docs linked at bottom of Wikipedia page. https://en.wikipedia.org/acoustic_kitty?w_w1. They basically put a microphones and radio in a cat and tried to release him to the Soviet embassy to wander around eavesdropping, since nobody suspects a wandering cat. Technical difficulties. Citation needed episode. https://yahoo.be/gcrji9xqc?si0zr0icn4woc new 5q that I learned about it from. Analyzing all that tape would be daunting, though. Over the span of a week, you'd have 6 full days of nothing, where the cat simply slept in the sunbeam, and 8 hours of Russian public servants saying PSSS PSSS PSSS. Most of the rest would likely be yelling at the cat in Russian for knocking over the vodka glass again. The Pentagon Papers, which were leaked, not outright declassified, and the resultant Church Committee report. These are what made public the CIA's actions in overthrowing governments and instigating assisting coups all over the world for decades leading up to the 70s. Pretty much every negative stereotype of the CIA we have today was created or informed by the Pentagon Papers and Church Committee report. Operation Northwoods is pretty fucked up. Same with MK Ultra. Operation Sea Spray, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/operation_c-spray a 1950 US Navy secret biological warfare experiment in which Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigii bacteria were sprayed over the San Francisco Bay Area in California, in order to determine how vulnerable a city like San Francisco may be to a bioweapon attack. Between 1949 and 1969, open-air tests of biological agents were conducted 239 times. In 80 of those experiments, the Army said it used live bacteria that its researchers at the time thought were harmless. Not so. Fun fact. S. marcescens is what causes the pinkish grime in showers bathrooms. I had a family member who had a nasty UT after catheterization for giving birth, and after a few failed rounds of antibiotics, they finally did a proper culture and antibiotic screen to reveal S. marcescens and the correct drug to use. Antibiotic resistance is a scary thing, and it's only getting worse. The ghost tapes with creepy noises that were played in Vietnam to try and scare the Viet Cong was pretty crazy. Not the most crazy, but worth a mention. Military still does this in training events at night. During JRTC they would blare videos of women and children crying and screaming bloody murder. It was very eerie. During the 60s the CIA noticed that artists tend to lean towards socialism and communism. They realized the best way to prevent this or discredit these political positions was to make them wealthy so they would be more invested in capitalism. To do this the CIA would anonymously buy modern art pieces no matter how nonsensical for very high prices. This made the otherwise highly niche and difficult to access modern art genre a chic, fashionable and highly profitable genre, and basically prevented prominent members of the art community from turning to socialism or communism by converting them to wealthy members of the upper class. TL. Dr. The Spolied Novo Riche avant-garde airhead artist stereotype was literally created by the CIA dumping money into prominent figures' pockets and allowing them to discredit their political activism by becoming self-indulgent parodies of themselves. I think someone mentioned Jackson Pollock was one of those artists. The pardon of the Japanese who ran Unit 731 in exchange for their findings. They performed countless experiments on live human POWs. Cutting off limbs to test blood loss, injecting them with diseases and seeing how they progressed when left untreated, vivisection of these same individuals, and other really fucking disgusting stuff that I don't have the stomach to type out. You can Google the rest. The US government felt it was more important to have that information in American hands than to let it go to the Russians, or be lost. You'd never be able to conduct those kind of experiments again, and for good reason, so they considered it the lesser of two evils. I work in the biomed industry. Between that and the Tuskegee experiments, those built the ethical codes and laws we have now. The attempts and further plans to kill Castro were straight up Looney Tunes shit, including, but not limited to, exploding cigars, Acme cigars, MK Ultra, but unfortunately the only documents we got from it are from an offsite storage space that the officials in the CIA forgot about. Also the CIA document that says the political structure of the USSR wasn't a one-man one-rule or the one talking about how Tibet was a feudal backwater. Wasn't the Unabomber supposedly a result of MK Ultra? I remember there being a documentary about him and how he participated in it due to him being at Harvard at the time. CIA checking what we know. Just making sure you're not focusing on that wage gap retirement anymore. Aliens. Yup, definitely not harvesting organs of poor broken countries' people for the wealthy. It's why we have all your DNA blood samples to ensure you're a match for the wealthy recipient. One of the craziest declassified CIA documents is Operation Midnight Climax, where the CIA dosed unsuspecting individuals with LSD as part of mind control experiments. It reads like a spy novel, but unfortunately, it's a disturbing chapter in history. You're leaving out the craziest parts of that one. The drugs were administered by prostitutes who slipped them to their clients in a CIA-run brothel while agents watched from behind a one-way mirror, hence the program name. They wanted to see if dosing people then letting them hang around and cuddle with the hookers after the sex would make people more likely to spill secrets. Turns out you don't even need LSD for that. Just get a guy laid and show him some attention and he'll talk about almost anything. The guy who ran the op was also well known for throwing huge parties for the other agents with mountains of drugs and prostitutes available for all. He would even call ahead whenever he was planning to be in town to make sure a prostitute or two could be lined up for him during his visit. Related to the CIA, there was the Strategic Services Simple Sabotage Field Manual No. 3 as a practical guide to sabotage. The manual gave clandestine officers a simple, effective method to sabotage industrial production, interfere with transportation and communications, and, most interestingly, degrade organizations' productivity from within. You can read the relevant bits here. https://www.forbes.com/ericlison/08/155/8-spies-guide-to-making-bad-decisions /?71799BBD143F closed bracket comma but holy shit does it sounds like everything that is going on in my corporate job. A few of my favorite tips. When possible, refer all matters to committees for further study and consideration. Attempt to make the committees as large as possible, never less than 5. Refer back to matters decided upon at the last meeting and attempt to reopen the question of the advisability of that decision. Haggle over precise wordings of communications, minutes, resolutions. What's the one where the US went from a war on drugs to the biggest cartel on the planet? Yeah, that one. You mean when George W. Bush partnered with the opium growers in Afghanistan to invade the nation? then ensured the opium would be quietly allowed to seep into the world market, including as poorly regulated pharmaceuticals, creating the unprecedented nightmare that is our current opioid crisis? Or do you mean all the other stuff? Project Paperclip, taking former Nazi scientists from Germany to America to hopefully beat the Soviets in the space race. Werner von Braun was the name of the leader scientist, celebrated in Nazi Germany as much as he was in the US. 100% the Gateway Experience. https://www.sire.gov/rdp96-00788R016-5.pdf closed bracket like this shit is fucking bonkers. Declassified doc from 1983 detailing the CIA's usage of harmonic resonance to gain access to the astral plane. It describes how the CIA used astral projection to create force fields around military bases, visit the future, and even talk to literal God. They call God the Absolute, which they claim is all of the universe compiled into a single point for a single moment in time, after which the universe re-expands. Seriously, read this shit if you have a mind for the creepy unexplained. That's half an hour my employers will never recover time. CIA black sites. Sectored prisons where terrorist suspects were taken for interrogate prison sentences and God knows what. Some sites were in Europe too, Poland and Lithuania. The Project Mockingbird files that show the CIA is directly manipulating the press and paying them handsomely to be CIA mouthpieces. Operation Northwoods. Rejected by President JFK in 1962, the plan was for the CIA to stage and commit mass acts of terrorism against the United States that would have included hijackings and bombings across major US cities. After these attacks were committed, the plan was to place the blame on Cuba to justify going to war with them. You can search this up yourself if you don't believe me. Cultura. Basically McGill University in Montreal sent mental patients to the CIA from the Royal Victoria Hospital. The CIA did all kind of nightmarish tests on them. This was done in Montreal and only came out decades later. One of my friend's mom said for years that the CIA did horrible things to her and everyone assumed she was just insane. Turned out she was right and lived all her life with no one believing her. Horrible stuff. Does only us intelligence agency declassifies their documents? Because at this point I'm familiar with most of it but have no idea about KGB, MI6, RAW etc, and I'm not talking about rumors but legit declassified confidential documents. Should be interesting to see what other CIA counterparts were up to. Yes, other countries' intelligence agencies declassify old files all the time. They generally don't make as big of a splash as the CIA stuff, but every now and then MI5 and the French DGSE also release some spicy things. MI5 declassifies files twice a year and releases it to the National Archive. You can read about it here. https://www.mi5.gov.uk/at-the-national-archives closed bracket dart. The papers describing astral projection. They brought a psychic in and placed an envelope with coordinates and a time frame on it. They asked him to describe what he saw. He described a dying planet where people had left to discover a new place they could populate. It was revealed that the envelope contained coordinates on Mars in the distant past. It gets much more in depth where he describes large structures, etc. It's not very long and very much worth the read. Edit. https://sire.gov/reading-room/docs/sire-rdp96-00788R00190760001-9.pdf. The Move the Men Who Stare at Goats was about this. MK Ultra. The mind control operation. I'm convinced that experiment was a success, especially with how blatant manufactured consent has become from governments. Got to be the one about remote viewing aliens in the late 80s. There is a document where a remote viewer, like a psychic who travels space and time, is commanded to try to view Galactic Federation HQ. The guy describes a huge structure with towering corridors and alien figures. It wouldn't be all that weird had the ex-chief of Israel Space Security, a very decorated and respected figure in the field, not echoed the language of this obscure document by coming out a few years ago and claiming there was a galactic federation of alien races that humans weren't allowed to join because we weren't worthy yet. He claimed there's a base deep within Mars where American astronauts work alongside the Federation. There is the testing of LSD and Agent Orange in Alberta and Ontario, which has now been positively linked to Parkinson's, mental illness, etc. RCMP plus CIA in the 1980s was wild.